Hello again, everyone. I'm Bill Green with the program that named itself Exciting Episcopalians, but this time it should be really exciting Episcopalians because we have two of the senior members of our church who have done so much for Trinity. They are Skip and Sarah Hoyt, and I'm delighted that you took the time to come by. How you doing today?
Great.
Good.
Now, I know a little bit about you, so Skip, you are the native Portlander.
I am a native Portlander.
What street you grow up on?
Grew up in Deering Center
Yeah.
until I was about 7. My folks moved to North Deering
Yep.
at that age, but grew up, went to a half a dozen different elementary schools in Portland, went to Deering High School.
Yep. And then Maine Maritime Academy.
Off to Maine Maritime Academy, which was quite an adventure.
What was casting like then? And were you an engineering major?
I was not an engineering major, I was a deck major.
Okay.
I studied and was practiced and taught to be a merchant marine officer. Also got a reserve commission in the United States Navy.
So did you go to see what happened with that degree?
After graduation, and by the way, there were only about 75 in my class, only about 12 of us got jobs in the merchant marine because there was just no availability. So I went in the Navy. I took my reserve commission, went in the Navy. And back then, you either had to go in the Navy or the Coast Guard. If you didn't, you were drafted. So I went in the Navy and spent 2 years on active duty as a navigator on a troop transport out of San Francisco. Made 25 round-trip crossings between Okinawa, Japan, Taiwan,
No kidding.
Philippines, going back to San Francisco.
What was the name of that transport?
USS Mitchell,
Wow.
622 feet long.
Wow. Give me some insight. What's that like, being on a ship?
Oh, we steamed independently, so mostly it was boredom. Mostly it was boredom. But we leave San Francisco, we'd go down to Port Hueneme, pick up Seabees, go to San Diego, pick up Marines. We'd transport Marines and Army and Seabees all over the Pacific, and dependents sometimes.
Well, did you drop them in Vietnam?
No, we did not go to Vietnam.
Yep.
We sailed off the coast of Vietnam, but Vietnam was not an issue
Yep.
back then.
Yep.
But my job was underway, officer of the deck and ship's navigator. So I was responsible for the safe navigation of that vessel, which was pretty interesting back then because there was no GPS navigation.
Right.
It was all done by sextant.
Yep.
And when it was cloudy and there was no sun and no stars, it was dead reckoning. Sometimes we didn't know where we were.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow.
So it was independent stealing. It was boring for the most part, but when it was foggy, I had a lot of close calls, near collisions in heavy fog off the California coast.
Missing other boats.
Scary.
Yes.
Sometimes I wake up in the night thinking about why we didn't collide.
Well, one of the aircraft carriers hit the Golden Gate Bridge or something 10 years ago, so you did better than them.
We did do better than them, but I have been under the Golden Gate Bridge 4 times and I've been over it. And I can remember going under the Golden Gate Bridge on one day. It was so foggy, I could hear the traffic over my head on the bridge, but I could look up and not see the bridge.
Yeah.
That's how foggy it was.
Wow. And then in 1974, you met a pretty girl.
Actually, I met that pretty girl in 1972.
Ah, I didn't know what was going on for a couple of years.
Flashback to the fall of 1972.
Oh, I could do that, actually.
And Sarah was living with her 6-month-old baby in a second-floor apartment up on the west end of Spring Street in Portland.
Wow, the West End, okay.
And was attending church on Sundays.
What church?
Trinity Episcopal Church.
No,
Oh,
cathedral.
Oh, well, I was going to the cathedral first.
okay. Yeah.
And I didn't have a car.
I came along with my car.
Ah,
So that was a savior. But the deciding factor here was there was a lady named Janet Colby
okay.
who lived not too far from Sarah.
Yeah.
She babysat for Sarah's child
Yeah.
when Sarah went to work. Well, Janet Colby just happened to be the wife of Dick Colby, who was an assistant minister here,
Right here.
with Carl Russell, who was the rector.
Yeah.
So that's how we got here.
Were you a church-going boy in 1972?
Was I what?
Were you a church-going guy in 1972?
No, I
No.
was not a church-going guy.
Too much time at Maine Maritime and in the Navy.
I was baptized in a congregational church.
Yeah?
Never was really a churchgoer.
So how'd the two of you meet?
Well, that's my part.
Yeah.
You're in, Sarah.
I was born in Boston,
Yeah.
so out of Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Grew up in Cambridge, and went to Christ Church in Cambridge,
Wow.
George Washington's church.
You betcha.
A big, beautiful church with chandeliers, held 500 or 1,000 people. In the 5th grade, I was Mary in the pageant,
Wow.
and Hugh McMahon was one of the 3 kings.
Wow.
And that's how far back we go.
Isn't that amazing?
We grew up, went our separate ways. My father had a business associate that went to University of Maine, Orono, and I had been accepted in New York and Connecticut, but hadn't really decided where I was going to go.
Yeah.
And so he orchestrated that lunch to make sure, I guess, that he thought I should go here. And so I came to the University of Maine in Orono,
Nice.
and went through there. I have a BS in education.
No kidding.
Phys ed English major with 2 minors, and graduated in '62
Wow.
and started teaching in Bangor. And
I got to know which school.
I was at Fifth Street
Fifth Street Junior High. I was from the other side of town, Garland Street.
and knew Bob Kelly.
Yeah, my baseball coach in high school, yeah.
Really nice. And then I started to go through teaching for 4 years, and got married and had a child. And eventually the marriage fell apart, and I came to Portland.
Aha.
I'd always said that if I was going to live in Maine, being an out-of-stater, I'd like to live in Portland.
A lot of people
And
have said the
that's I
same
did.
thing, yeah.
And so I was teaching and tutoring in the Portland area, and I made a new friend at Portland High named Leela. Well, Leela was going to register her car one day, and she forgot her registration. And so she was hitchhiking. She was older than I was. She was about 38. And a man picked her up. And this man was a friend of Skip's.
Aha.
So we heard about each other for about 3 or 4 months. And that fall, we went out on a double date, blind date, over in South Portland.
Where'd you go?
Well, it turned into Mary Manor.
Yeah. A little dancing?
Yes.
Nice.
He hadn't danced for years. And
Well, you can work with him.
he
I
was
mean, he's
nervous.
coachable.
Oh, yeah, we ate downstairs, and then the 4 of us went upstairs.
Very nice. Mary Manor, yeah.
Dance hall.
And I also want to say, it sounds, this woman was hitchhiking. In 1972, that wasn't odd at all.
No.
I hitchhiked a lot in the early 70s, and
Yeah.
I often saw women. Not long after that, hitchhiking went out.
Mm-hmm.
But normal people often hitchhiked then.
And
So-
she started dating this man herself. Skip-
Really?
Ken, his name was Ken.
Yeah.
And they started to live together, and eventually they decided that, well, he was doing real estate and they weren't earning enough money, so he decided to ship out. And he shipped out to sea, and that was after we got married, May 4th, 1974. He shipped out to sea and he died at sea.
Oh,
They were
how
going to
sad.
get married that August after our May.
Oh. Let's go back to you guys. So May 4th, 1976.
74.
74, excuse me. The Greens were married May 3rd, 1986. So that was Kentucky Derby Day, 1974. Where were you married?
Right here,
At Trinity Church, right here, down the...
right on this altar.
Yeah.
And because it was a second marriage, we had to get the bishop's permission.
Oh, who was the bishop then? I bet it was Lee Loring's father. Loring, Bishop
Loring, I
Loring.
think maybe Loring.
Or Wolf, I'm not sure.
Okay.
Maybe
But
Wolf.
I think it was Wolf.
Bishop
Wolf,
Wolf.
okay.
Bishop Wolf.
And we were one of the first ones, I don't know, at least in Maine, if not
Yeah.
everywhere, to be married in the church as a second marriage.
Wow. And who did the wedding ceremony?
Dick Colby and Carl Russell. It took
Wow.
two.
Yeah.
Took
Took
two of
two.
them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we were very poor. I mean, man, we were poor. With 3 kids to support at that point, we were very poor. And so we made a special day of it. I wore a floor-length gown, but in April, I was walking with my daughter. I had a townhouse over in Munjoy Hill,
Yeah.
which I bought through a special program because I was so poor. And I was walking with my daughter by the graveyard on the Eastern Pond,
Sure.
Munjoy Hill,
Sure.
and I fell down.
Oh my goodness.
And I put my left arm behind me and snapped my radius.
No.
I was taking her to kindergarten, and I said, Beth, we have to go back home. And I staggered back to my townhouse, hanging onto the Eastern Cemetery fencing all
yeah.
the way back.
Oh, my goodness.
He was at work. In those days, there was no MedQ.
Yeah.
And so somehow we called you at work
You called the police?
and called the police because they could take me into the emergency. And thus I got married with a cast up over my elbow.
Where's the picture, Sarah? You got to bring that in some Sunday and show it to us all.
And I had to send my gown, which I had made,
Yeah.
home to Massachusetts because now the sleeve wasn't big enough and I couldn't get on the sewing machine.
What are those puffy sleeves called? You needed to.
Yeah,
have
so
one.
it got redone and I wore it.
Now,
And got
was-
married with a broken arm.
Was anyone who attends Trinity today at that wedding?
No, I don't think so.
How about Hugh McMahon? I know you
he's
and
not
Barbara
here
are
today.
deceased, but was Hugh would have been here then?
Well, Hugh, you know, after we grew up together, and he went
Well, yeah,
away, and
yeah.
he went to college, and I went to college, and I came to Portland, all of a sudden, Hugh was at Trinity Church.
Yeah.
And he had married Barbara,
Yeah.
and we became fast friends, the
Yeah,
four of us,
I
just
knew that, yeah.
really close. But I don't think we have any pictures
I
of
don't
them.
remember if they were there.
And I should mention that Hugh and
And
Barbara
they were
McMahon,
here because they came in the 60s.
right? They sang in the choir here for 50 years.
Right.
That
Hugh-
choir back then consisted of 15 or 20 people
Yeah.
Up in the balcony.
up in the balcony. And this church on any given Sunday had between 130 and 150 people in it
Yeah.
at 10 o'clock.
Yeah. We got to do something with the choir. We got to build something, put them somewhere. We're thinking about it. So everybody who's thinking about the choir, we got to get the choir to another place. So anyway, you start going to Trinity. You're
Yeah.
having more kids. You
And-
got something to say.
I brought two children to the marriage.
I'm sorry?
She brought one.
Okay.
We did not have any between us.
Okay. So let's look at these children. I know we're jumping ahead 18 years, but there they are, all handsome. Oh, who are they and what do they do these days?
Go
Well,
with Chris.
the first one was Christine,
Yeah.
my daughter, who is now a veterinarian
Yes.
in Scarborough,
Yep.
owns her own business.
owns her own business, very, very successful, very happy at what she does.
Does only cats.
Everybody can hear you whispering.
Oh,
then-
well, he doesn't.
The microphone's right there. There's a little TV.
Then my son,
He only does cats.
I had my son Andrew, who was 6 years younger,
Yeah.
and he worked at the Press Herald for many years, in charge of the building on Congress Street. When they sold that building, he lost his job. He now works for a company called 43 North. They flip warehouses.
Yep.
He's a clerk that works for them.
Yep.
And then the third member of that trio was
Beth Lewis,
Yep.
who was born in Bangor. When we moved down here, she went through the whole Portland school system right through Deering High School.
Yep.
And then she went to William and Mary in Virginia.
Beautiful school.
College. And then she got 2 masters after that and got her doctorate from Arizona State
In what?
in science education.
Wow. And is she teaching somewhere
And
now?
so she's a just made full professor, which is a big deal. You have to do research, publishing, grant writing at the University of Nebraska.
Nice.
And we are going to throw her a party for doing that.
Nice. Congratulations
And,
to her.
You know, we're very proud of her for making full professor because it's not easy. She also just got a $3 million grant from the National Science Foundation all by herself in her own right. So she has to supervise 26 science teachers in Nebraska who will be carrying on the program of the grant that she just got.
So you raised the kids here at Trinity.
Yes,
Yeah,
we did.
They weren't big churchgoers. Beth
Yeah.
probably attended it here more than anybody.
Yeah.
And Beth was confirmed here.
Yeah.
It's confirmed here.
Yeah.
But our kids, it wasn't a Brady Bunch all at once.
Yeah.
They had to learn to mesh and grow
Yeah.
to love each other, which they do now. But as my son says, well, Dad, you've got 2 doctors and me. But he's not a hands-on. He is a hands-on guy. He's not a classroom guy.
But you guys as a couple have done as much for Trinity as almost anyone. I mean,
We've done a lot, especially him.
Well,
let's start with Skip then. Skip, I mean, you painted the sanctuary with Doug. That was an amazing thing.
for some reason, I fell into building and grounds. That was my natural inclination. I always pretty good with building stuff. And got on the Building and Grounds Committee. And Harry Waning was a junior warden back then.
Okay.
And all the buildings and grounds came under him. But I never stopped. I mean, I've got hundreds, if not thousands, of man hours into this facility.
Thousands. Yeah, I know you've got 1,000.
I think the last big project, Doug Crosby and I painted this sanctuary.
Right. You've got thousands.
Including up there,
Yeah.
which was no easy task. We rigged a scaffold and got up there.
Yeah.
But eventually, I got onto the vestry fairly soon. Ended up spending about 12 years of my life on the vestry.
Yeah. That's a long 12 years, Skip.
Eventually became junior warden.
Yeah.
And I'll never remember my first day as junior warden. Ann Shea gave me a 4-page list of all the things she was unhappy about in the kitchen. We had so many water leaks in the kitchen. We had pots and pans everywhere. Hugh McMahon was my senior warden at that time. And then about 2000, year 2000, I became senior warden and was senior warden at the time when Larry Weeks arrived.
Yeah. And just in case anyone doesn't know, the vestry is the board of directors of the church. They're lay people. And the junior warden is the warden of the people. So if you have something going on at Trinity Episcopal Church, magic voice, who's our junior warden now?
Gordon.
You
Yeah, Bill Gordon.
give a list of Bill Gordon. And right now, Jane Hartwell is senior warden, the second woman to be senior warden. And she is supposedly the priest warden, and they work on more administrative whatever things. Now, Sarah, let's talk about you. I know you've done everything here, but tell us a few of them.
I was the church photographer for about 10 years.
That's right.
And I also photographed Betty Gilmore's wedding and out in the garden with her wedding.
Now Betty Gilmore was a rector here from 90 to 2000, something like that.
Yeah, that's very
And
good, yeah.
she married she was widowed, and her husband was Roger Gilmore, who was president of the Portland Museum of Art.
Right.
And I remember
Portland
Betty.
College of Art.
Portland College of Art, of course, excuse me.
yeah.
I remember Betty in the pulpit when the Green family arrived in 94, and all of a sudden Roger started showing up. And I'm thinking, that's interesting.
Yeah, that's right.
And so they were married here.
They met at a friend's party or something, and she started inviting him over for tea. And it went from there. So I photographed their wedding, did all that, and was doing photography for the church.
Yeah, directories and things.
Snack bar.
And he and I, the two of us, Skip and I, ran the snack bar downstairs for the fair
Oh, my
for a
goodness.
while.
Yep.
We also did money collecting for the fair for quite a while.
Yep.
And so
Always
we
involved
did
in
that.
the fair, the Christmas fair.
Right.
What about yard sales?
And we always worked on the yard
Yeah,
sales.
everybody
Clean
works
up, running it. I'd run around and say at the end of the yard sale, buck a bag, and
yeah.
people could stuff as much as they wanted to into it. And then over the last 30 years, I have been head of the greeters.
Oh, yeah.
And in the last 10 years, probably, I scheduled the ushers and the greeters.
Yeah,
And so that's kept me busy.
yeah.
Anything else?
So Trinity has been an important part of your life.
Oh, definitely. Definitely.
25th anniversary wedding cum renewals right here.
You did vow renewals right here.
On this altar right here.
And that would have been 1999.
99.
And when we were married, we both had wedding bands in the first marriage. And
Yeah.
so between his job of working for the government and maybe hands getting in trouble, he didn't want to wear a wedding band when we got married. I did. And so I got my wedding band. And our 15th wedding anniversary came along, and I said, I'd like to have a regular wedding band because my diamond sits high and I don't want to bang it and break it.
Yeah.
And thus I got that wedding
Nice.
band.
It's lovely.
And I asked him at that time, I said, would you like a wedding band? Because he didn't have one.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, well, it's up to you. And I said, I guess that's not the right answer and we won't do it now. I'm not going to dictate whether, you have one or not. You have to want it. And so on our 25th, I asked him the same thing again. Would you like to have a wedding band? And he said, I would. And I went out, unbeknownst to him, without him, and bought him the wedding band, which is silver and gold that goes with his silver and gold watch.
Very nice.
And he never takes it off and wears it all the time.
Well, this is about ring number 4 for me.
Oh, dear.
So
You're rough on rings?
I was
or you lose them?
I was 165 when we got married and running marathons, and so I kept a couple of the first one, the expensive one, got kind of. We removed it one day with ice and pickaxes, and then there were a couple of $25 jobs from the Walmart, and now I've kind of flattened out, and this is actually a real ring.
All
But
right.
I have kind of a similar story. Rings, you can get them caught in equipment and machines, and then you take them off, you leave them on the workbench, and you can't find your ring.
And your body's changed. I've had
Right.
to go back and have my wedding band stretched a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because my knuckle won't allow it to
Yeah.
get on, and I don't have that much arthritis.
So I'm on Skip's side a little bit on that one. I can understand that. So
now he wears
what's the best part about Trinity for you?
I think back of so many years and so many changes. I mean, we've been through 4 or 5 bishops, 4 or 5 rectors, several outstanding interim. David Holroyd was an outstanding interim here for a couple of years. Roger Nichols here for a couple of years, outstanding. We've had great deacons in this church.
Jeff?
Alan Barnett was a deacon when we came to this church.
Yeah.
And he was a deacon at this church starting in the 1950s.
Wow.
And was here 30-odd years, I think, because his wife was Ruth Barnett, who worked in the office, who is the Ruth Barnett Award in her name. We've seen a lot of changes, but this place has always been our home. This has been our refuge. When times are troubled in the world, this is the place we
Safe
come
spot.
to seek peace and solace. Sometimes when I was working in the church, and I'd stick my head in the sanctuary, and it was empty, I'd come in and I'd say prayer. I'd kneel down and I'd pray alone. But it's always been a source of comfort. Go ahead.
And for me, it wasn't too high a church, coming from Christ Church in Cambridge, which was, in those days, you talked about the low church or the high church or whatever. And when we met, he was congregational. He had grown up in the congregational church. And unbeknownst to the usual me, I kept my mouth shut and just started, let's go to Trinity. I've been there, I haven't been there yet, but it's known to be a family church.
Yeah.
And I'd love to go, the 3 of us, and we'll see, how it goes. And so we started to come, and he started to fall in love with it. And in 1976, he was confirmed, and Doug Crosby was confirmed.
That's something.
And so the both of them did together. And for a long time in the office where the organist has her little office now, there was a banner. And each person in his confirmation class had to
Make a little emblem to
Yep.
sew
a
onto
pedal,
that banner.
like a pedal.
Yeah, and so we did that.
And so Doug's was there and Skip's was there for a long time. It sat in that little office. 30 years? Long time.
Well, we still
I
there.
don't know. No, it isn't there now because it's her office. I don't know where they moved it now.
It'll resurface, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's it.
Well, you've
and
done.
so he got confirmed, and here we are.
Yeah, I think, coming back to church for people at 30 or whatever, that it's just a great time to consider what's important in one's life, and oftentimes church starts to become, at about the age of 30, more and more and more and more and more and more important for many people. So
Yeah,
you know,
if there was ever a time to affiliate with the church, it's now.
yeah,
There's a lot of troubles in this world, and quite frankly, I think we need some divine intervention.
Yeah. Well, a church is a good place to find it.
But for me, from the 5th grade up, being Mary in the pageant and all that, I was involved in church,
Yeah.
Sunday school, day trips to Mount Monadnock in New Hampshire,
Yeah.
and all that. And so it always had been a place
Yeah.
in my heart and in my mind to go to.
Well, we're glad that you're here.
Well,
We're glad
to
that
be
you
here.
dragged Skip in here. And
Yeah.
we're grateful very much for all you've done for Trinity Church. We can never express it, never thank you enough, because it's just extreme what you've done. And we're very grateful, and it's always fun when we come in here on Sunday and you're popping in as
fun.
well. So
been
Skip
fun.
and Sarah Hoyt, thank you for everything that you've done.
Okay.
You're
And
welcome.
thank you for joining us and learning more about Royal Skip and Sarah, which is 2 people. And we'll see you again soon with another edition of Exciting Episcopalians.